So I got a chance to play XDefiant this past weekend within an insider session because I was lucky enough to get a code from Twitter, and I had a ton of fun. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to record and upload any gameplay, so I'm just going to have old gameplay from online on the screen from like trailers and such that they revealed officially, but I can't actually show any of the gameplay that I was able to get myself from playing the game this past weekend. So I'm just going to be here talking about everything I liked about it and everything I didn't like about it. So if you're not sure what XDefiant is, it's an upcoming 6v6 multiplayer shooter game, kind of like Call of Duty. So comparing it to Call of Duty is something I'm going to do quite often in this video, not just because I personally play Call of Duty a lot, but also because the developers themselves have been comparing it to Call of Duty a ton, and even some of the developers working on this game have worked on Call of Duty previously, including Mark Rubin, who I'm sure a lot of you know from Call of Duty Ghosts. He was the guy at the head of everything with Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer, and yes, he is the head of this game as well, and he's really been preaching this game on Twitter and saying that if there's certain things you don't like that exists in Call of Duty, such as skill-based matchmaking, then you should come over to our game because our game is not going to have those issues. So comparing it to COD is something I will do a bunch because it actually makes a lot of sense, and it does play kind of similarly to Call of Duty, but it has its own flavor. It has its own sense that sets itself apart, so it's not just a carbon copy of Call of Duty, but it definitely has that feel to it. The game has modes such as Domination and Hardpoint, although Hardpoint is called Occupy in this game, and they play similarly to how Call of Duty's Domination and Hardpoint play. But there's also two new modes called Escort and Zone Capture, and these ones are really interesting because the maps that you play on for these modes are like these really long maps where more areas are unlocked as one team starts to play the objective in a certain way. So for example, there's Zone Capture, and if the team secures a zone, then a new area unlocks, and then they have to secure another zone, and then the next area unlocks, and it kind of changes as the map goes along, kind of similar to something like War Mode from World War II. Again, it's just easier to compare it to Call of Duty because a lot of the things can be compared, but it definitely, like I said, has its own flavor and its own feel that I think sets itself apart from Call of Duty enough to make it warranted to play. The game is a hero shooter, so think of like Black Ops 4, where it's very much about the character you are playing as. Well, in this case, it's about the faction you are playing as because there's multiple characters per faction. There is a total of 4 factions currently in the game in this pre-alpha build that we played over this weekend. So yes, it wasn't a beta or an alpha, it was a pre-alpha. So that really does show how old of a version this is of the game. And they are not, finished whatsoever with whatever they're going to be releasing when the game officially comes out. And as for the specialists that are currently in the game, we have the Phantoms as one of the factions, we have Libertad, we have Echelon, and we have DeadSec. Now, these 4 factions, multiple characters within them, you can choose whatever you want. There are ultras, there are abilities, and there are traits. So the best way to explain this, again, in Call of Duty terms, it's a lot easier to do that. The ultras are essentially your main specialist weapon, like what you would have in Black Ops 4. So this is something that you have to charge up as the game goes on. The more kills you get, the more time you play the objective, it'll go by faster. So it just basically rewards people for getting kills and playing the objective. But it's a timer, so you'll eventually get it probably anyways. And these ultras tend to be very, very good. Like for example, one of them, it gives you a minigun with a spherical plasma shield around it. Another one reveals enemies, and it gives you this really cool 5.7 pistol that you can go around and shoot people with. There's another one which essentially gives you a large health and healing boost for a limited time. So there's a lot of cool abilities that you have with the ultras, but then there's also what they call an activated ability, and these are essentially like your specialist gadgets that you would use in Black Ops 4, where you have to use, in this case, LB, the left bumper, and you just use it every now and then. You get a new one every now and then. Like it's pretty much just that. It's a very quick thing to recharge. And a couple examples of stuff like that in this game. For the medic class, which is Libertad, they're more centered around like being medics. One of their abilities is a little gas canister that heals those who go in the area around it. Another one is essentially an invisibility suit, so it's like a cloak that makes you invisible. And another one can hijack enemy abilities and make them your own. So a lot of different cool abilities. Every faction has roughly 2, at least in the game currently, but there might be more later on. And like I said, there could be more factions even on top of that. I'm not exactly sure what they're planning for the future. And the last thing all these factions have are traits, and traits are essentially just perks. There is no perks in the created class system itself in this game. The created class in this game is only about the attachments and the actual weapons you're using, as well as equipment. But everything else is just within the factions, and that's where your perks are. And just some examples of some of the perks. There's one perk called Low Profile, which just makes you so you're not on the minimap when you're pinged. There's a Hardened passive trait, which gives you some increased health. So a lot of different interesting perks. So the factions are a massive part of the game, and I do think they work into the game better than what specialists were back during Call of Duty, because this game is very much centered around objective play, and these specialists all play into the objective in a very distinct way, and I think it actually works really, really well. So now that I've explained what this game actually is and what it feels like, let's just get into some pros and cons with the pre-alpha build. Of course, keep in mind, pre-alpha build is definitely going to get a lot better and change over time. So some of my positives that I want to say right off the bat, I absolutely love how competitive this game feels so far and how focused it is on the objective play. I was kind of worried about that because I don't want to have a situation like you have in Call of Duty where people are camping and just trying to get kills and they don't really care about playing the objective itself. But this game just feels like everything is centered around the objective to the point where everyone just plays it anyways. Even if you don't really care about winning, which in the pre-alpha build, there's really no incentive to winning games. There's no grindable things right now. So it's like what really matters, but I still just feel drawn to playing the objective. And it's a really fun time. It's not about going around getting as many kills as you can. You can just go in and play the objective and try to win that game for your team, and it is a lot of fun that way. There also is a normal scoreboard like what you were used to seeing in Call of Duty, and it actually shows you your kills and deaths, which I can't believe that's something I have to point out, but because Call of Duty just decides to not include the deaths on the scoreboard anymore for most of their games, I feel like this is something I want to point out. It is really nice getting to see your entire KD ratio completely. Another positive I want to point out, there is not going to be any strict skill-based matchmaking in this game like what we see in Call of Duty. This is something that I didn't really notice in the pre-alpha build itself, because obviously it's a smaller player base, so I didn't really notice any system or notice there not being a system or anything like that. But Mark Rubin, the head developer, he's been very, very clear about them not doing something like that for this game, and it's very much going to be based on other factors that don't include just kind of manipulating your skill like what we sometimes see in the recent Call of Duty titles. I also love the gunsmith so far because they actually give you detailed statistics for everything that's being changed on each attachment, and they are actually very balanced. Like, the attachments all look like they could actually be useful for your gun, so there's no issues there, and there's a lot of detailed statistics that you can look into, and it's just a blast. I've been having a lot of fun looking through the attachments and kind of changing around it for gun to gun. And also the balance on the guns themselves. I haven't noticed any completely overpowered guns yet. It feels pretty balanced. Another thing, the time to kill, it's actually nice and slow. It's not, laser fast like you see in some Call of Duty games. It feels kind of similar to something like Black Ops Cold War, maybe. I'm not sure exactly what the time to kill values are, but it does not feel too fast, and it definitely doesn't feel like incredibly slow to the point where it's just ridiculous for a 6v6 shooter. It feels just about perfect, at least in my opinion, as well as for the headshot multiplier, because there is a headshot multiplier there. It feels pretty rewarding to get headshots within this game. I think it just works absolutely perfectly. Also, the maps, really colorful. Have to point that out, but the maps are really colorful, and the maps also are awesome. Like, they all have a great layout to them. They're very competitive, mostly 3-laned, and some of them just have some really interesting areas that make them very different than other maps. So in no way, shape, or form am I bored of the maps in this game. And to add on top of that, there is a crap load of maps just in this pre-alpha build. I think there was a total of like 7 or 8. I'm not sure exactly what the number was, because obviously I only played as long as I could play, but from the time I did play, I think I was able to get at least 7 different maps in total. There might be more that I just didn't get to see, but from what I saw, yeah, I'm pretty sure I played on 7 maps, or it might have been 6, something like that. There was quite a few maps that I played on. Now, just a few things I don't absolutely love about the game so far. I think these things could definitely change over time. The first thing is it's not very responsive in terms of the movement and the aiming. It can feel a little clunky at times, and this is just an unfortunate thing of, obviously this game is not going to have the production value and the budget of Call of Duty, so it's going to be very hard for the developers to make it so smooth and so crisp like what you feel in COD. And it's not something that really ruins the game, it's just something you kind of have to get used to, and after a couple games you do get used to it, but it really is hard to get used to in those first couple games. I did change with my settings a little bit and it made it a little bit better. If you decrease the dead zones on your sticks, it definitely makes the aiming a lot better. But at the end of the day, given the production value of the game being obviously lesser than something like Call of Duty, it's just bound to happen, and it's something, like I said, you can get over, so it's okay. The spawns are good, but you spawn so far back in this game. Like, it's ridiculous sometimes, and I get why they do it. It's to, like I said, make the spawns so they're not a problem. So you're not having people spawning in front of you, you're not having people spawn behind you, you're not spawning yourself in front of people. But it makes it kind of annoying because sometimes you're playing and you feel like you spawn so far away from the action, you have to now run like 15 seconds to the action. And I'd rather the game being a little bit faster than that. It definitely feels fast paced, don't get me wrong. I never feel like the game's slow. Somehow they're still able to make it so the game is very fast paced when you're actually in the action. But once you die, then you're like, okay, now I gotta run all the way back to the action. So it kind of just a little bit of a hiccup there that I just don't really enjoy too much. I prefer getting back in the action as soon as possible, but I understand that could make things really chaotic and it probably wouldn't flow as well with the gameplay, but it's something I wanted to point out. And I think the last thing I'm going to say, maybe the second to last thing, is one other thing that I think is kind of a mixed thing. It's not like a huge negative, but it's something I'm a little mixed on. But this one is the specialists. Now, the specialists, like I said, I really enjoy, and I do think they do fit into the game well. But I think some of them, just a few of them, like the minigun, for example, definitely that minigun, they're just a little bit too overpowered. Like, the guns are very well balanced, but I feel like the specialists, there's certain ones that I feel like I'm just going to use more than others. And because they're specialists and you can kind of just earn them yourself, you don't have to earn them through like getting kills and staying alive for a while. You just kind of get them just by playing. It does kind of get frustrating dying by them when you feel like you can do nothing about it because it's a really powerful weapon. So the only ones that I felt that way towards was likely, honestly, the minigun was like the only one I really didn't like, but also some of the medic abilities just seemed a little bit too powerful, like increasing your health and such was just a bit much, like, because you can really increase your health to the point where I used that pretty much every game because I felt like it was just so powerful after I used all the others, and I learned that, yeah, these medic ones are probably the best ones to use. They're probably just going to be the ones that help your team out the most out of any possible thing. And the last thing I want to point out is the iron sights on most of the guns are not very good, and I don't know if that's intentional or what, but it's just a lot of the iron sights, man. They're really not easy to see through, so I use red dots on pretty much every gun I use in this game just because of that. So I don't know, it's a small thing, but it's something that kind of bothered me just a little bit. So all in all, really did enjoy my time playing this game. I definitely think this is a game that I will play when it officially releases, at least a little bit. I don't think it's going to end up being a very popular game just because, you have Call of Duty, right? Call of Duty's there, and regardless of this game having a lot of design choices that I think are way better than Call of Duty, at the end of the day, Call of Duty has the name, it has the money, and they're probably just going to be putting out content that's just smoother than what XDefiant can do, and that's just unfortunate because I really, like I said, I think XDefiant has some amazing design choices behind it and a lot of talent, and I think they can definitely make the game smoother for launch, and if it is a lot smoother, I think maybe it'll be something that can compete with COD, but I don't know, we'll see. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Have you played the game? And if you did you enjoy it? And if you didn't play it, are you excited to play it? Trust me, it's worth playing. I think you should all at least give it a try in the future. So I will see you on my next one. Peace out.